Welcome to Whistle Stop Mat-Su. I'm Patty Sullivan, Public Affairs with the Mat-Su Borough. I'm here with Manager John Moosey and Mayor Vern Halter and Assembly Member Randall Kowalke. And the first subject up is the DC trip. Talk about that.
Yes, three of us traveled back there, our manager, of course, and Assemblyman Dan Mayfield. We had an intense schedule. We met with DOT, primarily related to the FAST grant application, which we're hoping to achieve and receive $75 million as part of a contribution to our rail spur. We met with FEMA. I wasn't quite as excited about that meeting, but we did meet with them and share our concerns. We also met with our congressional delegation, all three offices, talked to them about PILT, the Cadillac tax, the FAST grant, their support, and we've already received a letter from all three of those individuals supporting our application. And we met with the National Association of Counties, and they're working on defeating, if it raises its head, a tax that would affect our municipal revenue bonds, as well as the Cadillac tax. So those were the primary stops we made, and it was compacted into a pretty tight schedule.
Yeah, Randall, I thought this was a very effective trip. I mean, we packed probably 9 meetings in 2 days with some very important issues. As you know, we have this rail project. We still need $125 million. We have $180 million stranded costs. And I really think the work that we've done, support we've gotten from our delegation, allows us to be competitive, because without that, in the state's issue, I don't know when we're going to get this rail complete, and it does not make sense to set of that flounder.
Well, I think one of the important things too, in addition to it, was we were able to highlight the fact that we've got a stranded investment of $180 million, and we have a shovel-ready project that has had its environmental impact statements done, and Senator Sullivan was particularly aware of the defense and security issues with having only the Port of Anchorage operating in the event of a catastrophe. We need to have rail service to protect our eyes in the sky with the F-35s, and he really jumped on that issue. Yeah. So I'm hoping.
I've got a question that maybe you could help some of the Mat-Su Borough residents. When you mentioned Cadillac tax, tell them what is a Cadillac tax? Describe that for them.
The health care plans under the Obama health insurance program, moving forward, there'll be a tax on what they decided is a premium health care plan. So essentially, as I understand it, for a borough employee, for my son who has Alyeska's insurance, it would result in a $4,000 or $5,000 per person tax, and in my estimation, it's clearly just a redistribution of wealth program.
So, and then on this, Mr. Moosey, like on our grant application for the railroad, who is that with, and what's the likelihood we might receive one of those?
Yes, it is with Department of Transportation. It's a new program. This is a second round, and it's competitive. Last year of the applications submitted, they've only awarded 8%. So I think we have a good project. That it's shovel ready and already in process is an advantage to us. And this is really, like I said before, really our best shot of getting this thing moving again and completed.
So the total amount of money we need is right around $120 million, and so this would go a long ways. And
the $75 million, and the match will come between a combination of ourselves. We're hoping to partner with the state. We've also met with ADA. We've met with the A2A private investment folks. We've also looked at TIFIA loans, which is another federal program, very low interest rate. So it'll be a package of that if we get awarded this grant.
And I see some of our congressional delegation wrote some great letters of recommendation, so that'll be a big help, won't it?
Extremely. We are very pleased. Senator Sullivan, right away when his program came out, said, encourage us to apply, and he said, anything that we can do, let us know, because this is our opportunity right now.
Senator Sullivan mentioned when we were in visiting with him that an hour before we were occupying that couch, Transportation Secretary appointee-elect, I guess, Elaine Chow was occupying that, and there's some close relationships there, which we think will help us.
Which is great, and she's the one who makes the final decision, so.
So this is kind of a big deal because the likelihood of the state of Alaska being able to help us with the current situation is pretty low, isn't it?
That is
So
correct.
it could be federal grant money.
Yes, with what the state is going through right now, our opportunity is very limited.
And it's a tremendous amount of federal money that is potentially
I imagine
available.
there's applications coming in from every state, isn't there, for after this chunk of money?
Absolutely. They've awarded 35% of this funding the first round. I'm assuming this will be 3 or 4 rounds, and then this opportunity will go by its wayside. But one advantage about doing this is the president-elect has stated that he wants to do a very large transportation program, infrastructure program. By going through this process and doing this, we are ready to compete with any other opportunity comes our way, which 3 months ago we would not have been ready.
Excellent.
Great. Did you want to talk about FEMA now?
No.
Your visit? Okay.
Yes, we will talk about FEMA. Essentially, FEMA helps us in the area of flood management, insurance, flood insurance, and we finally got some decent information, and they put together some maps. We went through that process. So in that respect, FEMA is doing a wonderful thing. We have approximately 1,000 folks that are affected with the changes in FEMA. 800 are good. 150 we'll probably be calling Alex Strawn about their situation. But the issue that we've had a struggle with is on a Matt River, we have erosion and people are losing their homes and properties, and we have thrown everything against the wall to compete for those funds, and they keep changing the target and we keep missing. So we politely raised some cane down there, and we'll continue to do so because we cannot give up on that effort. It's just we are frustrated because they told us we had a great application, it should have been funded, except we changed the rules and this time and you were not eligible for funding.
When is our 2012 flood money coming, by the way, from FEMA?
It is trickling in. However, there's some other issues and requirements where things have changed. We want to apply the reimbursement money to meet that change. And the result is no, you have to spend the money where it's not going to be most effective for us. So we're continuing to fight that
Not
all we
least
ran.
of those changes are the river's course changed, and they're requiring us to address something that's almost
So
irrelevant.
4 years later, we're
Yes.
toying with FEMA.
Yes.
As you know, the wheels of government turn very fast. Yeah.
Very well. I'm glad you had a chance to talk to him at least, and maybe that'll help move things along.
We are hopeful.
You're confident?
No, I'm hopeful.
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 At best.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next subject, we're going to talk about the meeting with local legislators at the new Wasilla Library, and many of them were newly elected. How did that go?
Well, I thought it was first of all a great location at the new library over in Wasilla, and and we had all the delegation. I think 2 weren't there, Mark Newman and maybe George Rauscher. Otherwise, all the new elected representatives and senators were there, and I thought it was a very good discussion. We covered a lot of territory about, of course, everybody's worried about the fiscal gap down in Juneau, and we all understand that. And I'm hoping from this that they met our assembly members, and we have a chance to meet them. And then it was just a meet and greet, and I thought it was quite. What did you think?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I thought it was great, and I had reached out to folks in my district a bit earlier, and this was a continuation of that. We were able to continue discussions and to make sure that they understood the needs of our borough and particularly my district.
Yeah, the word that kind of came up a few times was communication, and I thought that was a good start. You know, besides the new senators, or existing senators and the representatives, key to that is their staff and the borough staff. And so to make those connections early is important. And it's a very difficult time. In the past, we went down and got a bushel full of money. Now we just want to make sure we can survive. And so that conversation and explaining how their actions is going to affect us or their inaction is going to affect us is very important this session.
We had some bullet points there that we handed out from they're approved by the assembly and the mayors. We had Mayor Cottle and Mayor DeVries and Mayor Thompson had kind of picked them out too. What were some of those bullet points? Some of the main things that we want to communicate.
Well, essentially, we feel very slighted, like probably the rest of the state, that our school bond reimbursement was reduced greatly, and that put a $6 million hole right in our budget the day before our operation is going to start. Second thing is we know we're going to be losing revenue sharing. That really affects the cities very much, especially Houston, because it's smaller and really depends on that.
So it's that's $6 million 75-25 thing on the school bonds. That really hurt, didn't it?
Yes, it did, and there's no guarantee it's not going to happen again.
And we've communicated that to the governor's office and now to our legislative delegation, so there's some hope.
We've had conversations, we've had letters, and January 1st, the first meeting in January, you're going to have a resolution prepared for you in resolution form telling them,
Exactly.
do what you said you're going to do, reimburse us.
So I thought it was a great opening, and we'd missed a year on meeting with our legislative delegation here, so I thought it was a good restart, and hopefully there'll be some good things come out of it. So, anything?
Yes, no, it was wonderful, and I encourage us doing that as often as we can.
We probably should go down to Juneau and meet with them again, shouldn't we?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right, we have joining us Terry Neininger, who's chair of the Mat-Su Borough Fish and Wildlife Commission. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you.
And that's an incredible group of volunteers with tremendous knowledge on fisheries, which is great for us given the upcoming Alaska Board of Fisheries meeting. Terry, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thanks, Patty. So, from February 28th to March 8th, we have the State of Alaska Board of Fisheries meeting for Upper Cook Inlet in Anchorage at the Sheraton Hotel. The Board of Fisheries meets every 3 years to discuss Board of Fisheries issues for Upper Cook Inlet. And they review current fish policies, they make revisions and possible changes to regulations and laws. And this includes commercial fishermen, personal use and sports fishermen, and subsistence. So this is an extremely important meeting for us. We, in 2014, successfully lobbied the Board of Fish to establish a conservation corridor in the center of Cook Inlet. This was to restrict the commercial fishermen from intercepting fish and allowing their passage to northern Cook Inlet. Subsequent to that, we saw an influx in especially coho salmon in the years 2015 and 2016. There is a number of proposals coming forward to the Board of Fish to reverse these regulations that were established in 2014. This is concerning. The Fish and Wildlife Commission has a strong interest in preserving the conservation corridor, and we need to lobby hard to do that. This meeting is also open to the public, and Valley residents can certainly testify. We're encouraging them to testify. You know, a central theme to both the Commission but the Valley in general is that it takes fish to make fish. And this is extremely, extremely important here. If the regulations of the conservation corridor are rescinded, then this is going to have a serious impact on salmon returning to the valley. This will not only impact the sports fisheries, but to a greater extent it'll affect the spawn and the regeneration of salmon for future runs. Again, it takes fish to make fish.
Terry, can we dive in and pause on that visually, that corridor? Because what it is it's copying like the best commercial fishery in the world, Bristol Bay, right?
That's correct.
It's you've got this corridor where we're hoping our silvers and some of our reds, pass north, and you've got the commercial guys closer to the shore where their natal, streams are. They're after the sockeye and inadvertently intercepting our silvers.
That's correct. The commercial drift fleet is primarily concerned with sockeyes, but they really want to extend that season and extend that fishery to include as many coho as possible. It's concerning for us because this has a direct impact on fish returning to the valley streams.
And the king salmon too. Now, what do the numbers look like on the king salmon coming up through this corridor?
Well, the king salmon escapements are also down, and I might mention that 8 of the 14 statewide stocks of concern are in Upper Cook Inlet, and a number of those affect king salmon.
And a stock of concern, define that for folks.
Well, a stock of concern is a stock that is not getting adequate return to streams to spawn. And there's 3 levels of a stock of concern, but it's important that you identify this as soon as possible to affect future generations. The Board of Game and Alaska Department of Fish and Game they need to take more effective actions to reverse the stocks of concern. They've designated several stocks of concern, but we need actions and steps and plans to bring forth to return to healthy runs.
So who's pushing, like you got the commercial fishermen down in the Cook Inlet, Kenai area, and I suppose they're dead set against this corridor. They'll be asking for a change at this meeting?
Absolutely. The United Cook Inlet Drift Association and several related groups have a collective number, about 11 proposals that want to modify or do away with the conservation corridor.
In most of the Mat-Su Valley, we're sports fishermen, and we have lodges and hunt and guides, and all of our tourist industry is basically based on the fish return, correct?
That's correct. It's had a tremendous impact on the local economy. Sports fishing is down. Sports fishing guide activity is down. Of course, sales to the sporting goods stores have all been impacted. We're in the process of commissioning an economic study with the state of Alaska to illustrate the declines in sport fishery up here in the valley. But we won't have the results of that for another 18 months or so.
So if they reverse this corridor, this is going to be a drastic step backwards. We're going to go back a decade almost, aren't we?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. It will be a giant step backwards, and we have grave concerns about it. I will say one thing about king salmon. The interception of fish in the conservation corridor affects primarily coho. King salmon, they have a different season.
So we're a little bit better shape there. So
yeah.
we have to work on our habitat up here in the valley anyway, don't we? We have to make sure that our habitat and culverts that we're working on so fish can get back up streams.
Well, and it's to be acknowledged, we've done tremendous work on fish passage culverts in the last few years. It's just really awesome. 77 new culverts, but the borough's installed, and over 30 culverts privately, all in areas where spawning fish were unable to get upstream because of the culvert passage.
And
so
Fish and Game called that unprecedented in the state.
So we're working on that habitat.
We're the
correct?
leaders,
Yeah,
right,
we're the
on
leaders
fish
in that.
passage.
And then the northern pike. I suppose we're held to a standard that they're hurting our runs.
That's one of the criticisms that's come out. We have pike in a number of our waterways and in some of our lakes. There are cases where they've had a definite influence on recovery, specifically Shell Lake, Sockeye. The runs there have been diminished dramatically because of pike. But pike is really a smaller issue as opposed to needing to maintain the conservation corridor.
Okay. Because if that corridor goes by the wayside, then of course all the cohos, the silvers coming up, we'll see that number go backwards.
Absolutely.
Well, what can Mat-Su residents do to help you out with the meetings?
Well, residents can certainly come and testify at the Board of Fish, and I believe Patty's got information on that on the website or the borough site.
We're going to have a landing page for folks to click on and learn more about what the commission's efforts are, as well as the nature of our fish. You can testify online if you don't want to show up at that meeting, and write letters, and we definitely need them, because I call this the Salmon Super Bowl. I mean, this is everybody jockeying for position on their share of the fisheries in Upper Cook Inlet, and of course our commission has 2 retired biologists, and they definitely advocate for sustainability, keeping the stocks healthy or returning them to health.
I've always been worried, as far as the Department of Fish, that they're kind of oriented towards commercial interest. Is that still the case, or has it been changing a little bit?
Well, I think that there's a tremendous lobbying power with commercial fishery. I mean, that's a multi-million-dollar industry, and they have an expressed interest in maintaining the commercial fisheries at any cost. One of the reasons we want to complete the economic survey is we want to illustrate that the sport fishery, especially here in the valley, has got tremendous strength in itself, or it has in the past, and has the potential to do so again. We're anxious to get the survey done and then illustrate that to the Board of Fish. I will say one thing about the Board of Fish. We have some new members on board that are have a greater level of sensitivity, I believe, towards maintaining healthy fish populations, and we're encouraged that we're going to have their ear when the
Right.
Board of Fish meetings start.
I know when we met with the legislative delegation, we had a complete handout on this particular issue and handed it out to all our new senators and representatives so that they're, and I'm sure they're all on board in keeping this corridor.
Yeah, I'm certainly optimistic. Like I said, there's a number of proposals from the commercial side that want to do away with the conservation corridor, so we need to be focused on
And we
this.
got to work on Governor Walker too. And
Absolutely.
I imagine he hears a lot from the Kenai delegation.
Well, he does. Just to revisit a comment Patty made earlier, if you can't make it to the Board of Fish meeting, you can certainly send a letter in or comments online, and I think that's something that residents might want to consider if they can't get it into the Sheraton.
Will that be on the borough online, or will they get on the state?
Well, the borough can direct you to
Right.
the state
So
website. There's a
we'll
state
have a link?
website
Okay.
where you can submit those.
We'll set a link up so they could comment on our link, and we'll get it right to the right people.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you very much for joining us, Terry.
Well, sure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Terry.
Yeah,
Okay.
For all the hard work and keeping this going.
Okay, well, welcome Alex Strawn, Manager of Development Services.
Welcome.
Alex is going to talk with our members here about first monofill sites or construction debris sites, and then secondly marijuana permits.
Yeah, so this monofill site was a sort of a long time continuing saga with a lot of twists and turns, and I can't go into all the details here today, but essentially it started in 2013 when an Anchorage company applied to operate what's called a monofill, which would be construction debris that would be deposited on the Glen Highway out sort of beyond, just past the fairgrounds. And the business plan was to do a lot of recycling in their Anchorage facility and to shred up the material and bring it out to our place out here in the valley, and that would be its sort of final resting place. It was in an old mined out gravel pit that had been mined nearly all the way to the water table. It was originally denied in 2013. They came back a year later with a ton more information. They had hired engineers and geologists and things like that to support their application. At that point, we went forward again. It was very controversial. A lot of concern regarding water table issues, regarding windblown trash, and to complicate matters, they had sort of prematurely dumped some of this material at the place that had blown onto neighboring properties, and so we had an ongoing compliance issue with them, which sort of really kicked up a hornet's nest. Then in 2014, it was denied again based on a lot of those concerns that were brought up. They appealed it, they lost their appeal. They then appealed to the Superior Court, and it was remanded to the Planning Commission on a procedural error. And the court didn't take up the merits, they just remanded it based on a procedural error. And so just recently, the Planning Commission held a new public hearing, and staff recommended denial based on a lot of the concerns that occurred, and CMS recently withdrew their application. So as of right now, that's sort of a done deal.
Because the application's been pulled by the company seeking the permit.
For whatever reason, they withdrew their application just before the Planning Commission was set to make a decision.
And so, in a monofill like that, so the material going in there, that's just, you said it was construction material and things like that which could include asbestos and
Absolutely.
What kind of materials?
Yeah, so part of their plan was to have an asbestos cell, regulated asbestos cell, and then non-regulated asbestos would go into the the main dumping area. But mostly what you're looking at is anything that comes from the demolition of old buildings or new buildings. And these sites need to exist. The borough actually has one at the central landfill that we manage. This was just not the right place for it. There's certainly known contaminants that are associated with building products, some different types of metals that could get into the water table, things like that. And there was a ton of science and on both sides of the issue here.
So that goes in front of the planning commission, not the assembly, so that whole decision on a CUP.
That's correct. That sort of ends at the planning
Kind of
commission
moot.
until it goes to
It's moot now.
Right now, there's no application on the table for us to review. It's done.
And at one of the planning commissions that I was listening to was fairly recent, you were talking about liners and a whole bunch of issues like that were...
Yeah, so at the sort of a last minute revision by the company was to include a liner to hopefully reassure some of the residents that there wouldn't be pollution to the water table. However, a liner sort of opens up a whole new can of worms. Once you install a liner, you have to
Leachate.
You have leachate that you have to manage in perpetuity,
Right.
because otherwise it'll fill up like a bathtub and cause even more damage. So.
Alex, they left Anchorage, came out here. Is it easier to set up something like that or not?
Well, we have a process that looks at every proposed development on a individual basis and the unique characteristics of the area they're planning on doing it. So I think this type of thing in a reasonable location could be done. It just this was not the right location.
Yes, and I think we need these type of services here. We also provide those, but also too with this company and our own efforts, recycling is really a key, especially with our large costs. So any opportunity we have to encourage recycling and reuse of material is something that's been on a mission for the Mat-Su Borough for many years.
Absolutely. Anything you can do to reduce the amount of waste that goes into the waste stream, that goes into the ground, is tremendous gains.
Was there any reason stated for withdrawal of the permit, or just the company just felt that
It was a very short and simple letter. Perhaps they saw the writing on the wall,
Right.
But they didn't specify why they
Withdrew.
They did certainly express concern that staff took the position that this particular company at this particular location was unsuitable to do this because of their past violations and
Well, you mentioned earlier that they actually started moving material in without a permit. Is that?
That's correct. A fairly large pile of material was dumped in that area prematurely. They knew they had to get a permit. They had been in talking with
Right.
us, it just happened that the wind picked up and blew it on all the neighboring properties, and so.
So the issue of credibility is a one that planning commission is going to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And after that, they argued that the material that was there was not trash, and we went through that whole thing with the courts and things. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, good work.
Thanks.
Next subject is marijuana permits or cannabis.
Yeah, man.
This is a big one. That's
a hot
ongoing.
topic, yeah.
So give us the status of that. Where we at?
Yeah, well, it was discovered some time ago, a few weeks ago, a month ago, 2 months, something like that, that there was sort of a loophole in our code that was adopted. And that is that our code that deals with conditional use permits does not apply within special land use districts. Mm-hmm. And that actually has been in place since 1983. And it was just now that it was discovered. And
in particular, Talkeetna was kind of the hot spot, wasn't it?
well, Talkeetna was the one area where there is 2 applications in with the state.
Right.
And so one of the applications was a small cultivation facility on the sort of the outskirts of the special land use district, and it looks like they're sort of going to get through without having to go through our conditional use permit process. And
That's the one that we refer to as grandfathered in.
yeah, so we have a fix in place that unfortunately got delayed last night and will be on the January 10th assembly meeting, and hopefully we'll close the loophole and make the conditional use permit applicable within special land use districts. If and when that gets fixed, then this company that has a license with the state and has infrastructure in place built already should be eligible for pre-existing legal non-conforming status. And as far as I can tell, that is the only marijuana-related facility that will have sort of taken advantage of this loophole and be able to operate without a permit.
How about setbacks? We're hearing a lot about setbacks. So you have a licensee that goes in and gets a state permit and under certain setbacks, and what's the status in the borough? We gonna have the same setbacks and?
Yeah, so the state is really looking at health and safety. They're not really considering land use impacts. And at a local level is where they sort of defer land use regulations to us. And I was sort of given direction by the assembly when I was helping to craft this to keep cultivation facilities out of sort of these little residential neighborhoods, 1 acre lots with a little cul-de-sac, right? And because we don't have specific zoning that identifies what a small lot residential area is, the best way that I could find to accommodate that would be to require this 100-foot setback. And unfortunately, it has not been very popular with a lot of people who invested in infrastructure prior to the regulations being built.
Prior to borough regulations.
Yeah, and I think the borough is very straightforward, saying, look, we're developing regulations. Any money that you invest in infrastructure right now is at your own peril because you don't know if it's going to meet our regulations or not. But these are real investments and real people that are having a hard time here. So yeah, there's a handful of people who are in a bad spot and are asking the Marijuana Advisory Committee of the Assembly to sort of loosen that 100-foot setback.
Just to make a reasonable setback that
Yeah,
still get to the same intent.
Right. Yeah. So whether it gets decreased to 50 feet or eliminated altogether, I guess would be up to
What's the setback for a normal business? Any other business? I mean, I shouldn't say normal. Just any other business wants.
Yeah.
What's the setbacks there?
10 feet
10
from side and rear lot
So
lines.
significant difference.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So Assemblymember Sykes had an interesting proposal at the last meeting where he suggested exempting what's called a limited cultivation facility. And that's,
What's the definition of that? Right? We
So-
heard that last night.
Yeah, so the state actually has separated limited cultivation facilities from standard cultivation facilities, and that is
Standard would be commercial. Is what-
no limited cultivation facility is 500 square feet or less under
Okay.
cultivation. So smaller impact, presumably probably less smell than say a 10,000 square foot operation. And so, and actually, interestingly, back in June, both the Planning Commission and the Marijuana Advisory Committee recommended that limited cultivations be exempt.
Be accepted from the CUP process.
Yeah, and that they essentially could, as long as they get a state license, they can operate without any of our standards.
Is that what's moving up towards the assembly for approval?
I anticipate that Assemblymember Sykes will introduce that
Okay.
amendment. So that, if you built prior to the regulations and you have a shop, it at least offers them something that you can still operate commercially, but not in the capacity that maybe you intended to originally.
Is that the size of the shop on Knick-Goose Bay Road that's having trouble?
The size, the one on KGB Road would, I think, intended to apply for a limited cultivation facility license. And several of them are in that position. Not all of them, but that is the case.
Alex, when might the first cultivation business open and retail?
Yeah, so it's looking like 2 or 3 retail facilities very well may be up for the March 6th meeting in front of the Planning Commission. It depends. There's a couple of moving parts in there, but that's what it's looking like is March 6th for the first retail facilities. The first cultivation facility very well could be up in Talkeetna in a special land use district because they've...
That one that's grandfathered in.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the second one still has to wait for this new regulation that's going to come out in January 10th. We'll hear that.
So the other...
Other applicant from Talkeetna.
Yeah, so one that's got people pretty riled up is it's the Mountain High Expedition on Main Street, Talkeetna, and I think it's the High Expedition is what it is. And I cannot apply till January 10th because there's no regulations that really
Right.
apply to them right now. But I anticipate that we can still get them in on one of the March meetings. It may not be March 6th, it may be March 20th, but we're going to try our best to get them all in on March 6th.
It was pretty interesting to hear last night that the SPUD, especially district up there, required businesses to be on Main Street. Wasn't that one of the arguments that?
Main Street is 100% commercial. There may be one resident, it's a little holdout, but it is as commercial as it gets for the Matanuska City Borough. Yeah,
Pretty interesting things going, kind of growing pains, isn't it?
indeed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Alex.
Absolutely.
And next up, we have a conversation with Eric Wyatt, our IT director on emergency dispatch services.
Hi, thank you, Patty. And so we want to talk a little bit about our new dispatch contract. So a little bit of history is currently the borough has need for dispatch services for our emergency services department, which is fire, EMS, rescue, and animal care. So that has been contracted out to the City of Palmer Dispatch, law enforcement and dispatch for the past 7 years. And so what every 5 years we're supposed to come back and do an RFP and renew the contract. This contract has been extended for the last couple of years while we redid the RFP and looked for other possibilities. Now, we're looking for other possibilities not because the service hasn't been good. It's been very good from the City of Palmer for a number of years. But again, just because of our borough rules, we have to go out and recompete these contracts from time to time. So that's what we did here recently. And this time we put out the request for proposal, or RFP, and we got back 3 responses: the City of Palmer, the City of Wasilla, and one other commercial vendor. And after scoring them, we decided that based on operational expertise, technical viability, and price, that Wasilla was going to have the best opportunity to serve us. Now, Palmer, having done the work for a number of years, also had excellent operational expertise and excellent technical, and the price was a little bit higher. So all things considered, Wasilla had the better proposal. And so what we're in the process of doing right now is performing that transition.
So Wasilla won the award. They're the new bidder.
Yes. And at last night's assembly meeting, we passed the legislation that allowed the award of that contract. So this is a major step for us.
Yes.
Very, very important.
So what's the transition period? How's that going to work?
So after the award today, now we can start to distribute funds to Wasilla so that they can begin to prepare their facility to take over our portion of the operation. The timing is that they will be prepared to have operations by April 1st, and from April 1st to June 31st will be an overlap period where not only Wasilla will be operating, but Palmer will continue to operate. So as of last night, we also continued our contract with Palmer through the end of June, and that's the transition period with the target of Wasilla taking over operations on July 1st of 2017. Now, we extended the contract with Palmer for a full calendar year into December 31st, just in case that there's any difficulties, and we need Palmer to continue to provide service for us for longer than that period of time. So the contract is in place to ensure public safety no matter what might go wrong with this project.
I think that's a good transition, and because this is public safety, and people expect when they call 911 to get good, clear service, fast service, I think that's very wise to have that overlap and make sure the transition is done perfectly and completely, as opposed to winging it.
Very much so, and a lot of discussion and thought went into this, and it's going to cost us a little bit more to have a transition period, but we think it's very well worth it considering public safety, because this is the kind of thing, when you dial 911, you need service. That's why you're dialing the phone. So we're going to try to ensure that during this transition period.
So Eric, with the change, how's this going to affect the actual users, our customers or citizens, when they use this service? Is there any improvements to this switch?
We will be getting some improvements. While we were going through this RFP process and while we were looking for a new contract, we postponed some of the projects that would have updated some of our systems to what are called next-gen systems or next-generation systems. So some of our services have been getting antiquated over the last couple of years where we would have liked to upgrade them. So as part of this new contract, all those things are going to be upgraded. So we're going to get some improved service. One of the things that's going to be an improved service is what's called reverse 911. And so what that means is when you call 911, of course, somebody answers the phone and they dispatch emergency services to you. But with reverse 911, if we know that there is a problem in the area, the dispatch center can send notifications out to people's phones. So this is going to be a huge improvement to services to alert people to danger when it's occurring. We also had issues in the past of transferring calls between dispatch centers in what was referred to as CAD to CAD, CAD being computer-aided dispatch. So Palmer has dispatched our services, and that again is fire, EMS, and rescue, but the law enforcement was dispatched for Palmer, by Palmer, and law enforcement for Wasilla was dispatched by Wasilla, and law enforcement for Alaska State Troopers was dispatched by Wasilla as well. So depending on what the nature of the call was, the call had to be transferred. So the CAD to CAD at times was difficult because we had two different CAD systems, and the information didn't transfer.
So that's going to be corrected now. That's gone.
That's going to be gone because part of this, we're going to get both facilities on the same CAD system.
So if you have a burglary, you make one call.
You make one call, and the information is in the hands of the
police
responders.
department's going to go by address and
regardless of where you are and what kind of
that's going to be a huge advantage.
So we'll have less time for people on the phone, maybe re-explaining what the problem is. That'll all go away. There have been some incidences where there was dropped calls or perceived dropped calls. That should be reduced greatly.
What do you mean by perceived drop calls or drop
Well,
calls?
when you get a drop call, it's not always the CAD-to-CAD interface that's the problem or the dispatch. Your cell phone can simply lose contact with the tower, and then you have a dropped call. And that was perceived to be the dispatch's fault, and it wasn't necessarily. So we will still have those problems occasionally, but that has more to do with maybe where you are and where your cell phone is and poor service in an area, as opposed to the technology on the dispatch side. We're going to get that upgraded, and that's going to be the most current thing. So we'll have good technology.
It's certainly a vital service, but also very expensive, right?
Very expensive. Yes, and so we're going to be paying a little more. In the past, our contract was for just personnel to the city of Palmer, and that was just under $900,000 a year, just for the personnel. The technology was supported by the borough and my department, so we kept all of that stuff running, and so the total cost for our dispatch services was about $1.3 million a year, and that included the manpower from Palmer and our support portion. Going forward now, we're going to be looking at about $1.5 million a year, so it's going to be a little bit higher. And as part of this, the borough and my department will no longer be supporting the technology. We'll simply hand over that responsibility to Wasilla. And so now you have the people that are responsible for the manpower and the dispatch and the call taking also responsible for the technology.
So
it puts it all in
reduction in budgeting within the borough,
It is.
but it's covered by the contract.
Yes, it is. And so it's a much safer environment because the people using the systems are also responsible for the systems. We did not have guaranteed 24/7 service as far as updating the technology. So if there was a problem with technology, I didn't have people that were mandated to go out in the middle of the night and fix this stuff, but my people always did, which is credit to them.
And we have we have the Palmer Police and the Wasilla Police and the Alaska State Troopers. So people outside the cities, they make a call in, burglary or whatever the situation is, that's going to automatically go to the state troopers?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So that'll be an improvement.
It'll be a huge improvement, yeah.
So today we are filming on solstice, the darkest day of the year, but coming up is some light. So, Mayor?
So we gain a second today, don't we? Or gain a second tomorrow?
I think tomorrow or Friday, right?
Well, I just wanted to wish everybody in the Mat-Su Borough a Merry Christmas to all our citizens and residents and, our staff. I want to wish a Merry Christmas to Mr. Moosey and to you, Patty, and to our great clerk, Lonnie McKechnie, and I know Nick Sparopoulos, our attorney, is gone down out of state right now, but Merry Christmas to everybody. And to all our school all our students and our school teachers and the school board. We have a great relationship with our school board, so Merry Christmas to everybody there. And all the people that work for the borough, you know, the people that are out there driving school buses and driving our ambulances and our firefighters and, you know, the people that are maintaining the road, our road graders. Merry Christmas to everybody. And
Rescuing reindeers,
rescuing reindeer, I saw that. Wasn't that a great...
saving the FedEx.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that, rescuing reindeers. How did that happen?
It was fabulous. The chief of the water rescue team was out of town. So his staff stepped up.
The reindeer actually, which river did the
It
reindeer?
was the Matanuska River, and it was a couple hundred yards out across ice, but there was a, rapidly flowing glacial water, and it was pretty spooky, but our water response team went out there, completely geared up, trained up, and our animal care chief out on ice, luring that reindeer, Arthur, off the ice. And the reason they went out there, of course, is to prevent humans from risking their lives out there.
This one had a red nose too, didn't it?
I think we had the red noses, but the owners had been trying to get the pet off the ice for 2 days, and they were running into overflow, open water. I mean, it would have been a life safety issue if the borough hadn't stepped in.
Sounds like a teenager issue to me.
Well, at least we're having winter this year. We've got snow. It's just beautiful here in Palmer. And driving down from Willow up there, we got 15 inches or 16 inches. And have you been out snow machining yet?
Not yet, I've been too busy.
Well, we got to straighten that up. And
That's a fact.
And on a personal note, I'm going to be driving a dog team in the Connect 200 sled dog race that starts January 7th, and I'm going to back-to-back go to the Copper Basin 300, which is the next weekend. So I'll be doing about 500 miles here coming up in January. So it'll be fun to get out with the dog team on the trails.
How many
And,
mayors are driving dogs?
Well, Carl Castle used to do a little bit of dog driving up at Fairbanks, but I think he's probably totally retired now. So I love it. We got great trails for the first time in several years. So, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Every day you know.